I've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole lately and started looking at the subreddits for the individual Assassin's Creed games, namely Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And something I've noticed about these subreddits is that there's just a lot of praise and goodwill for these games. I suppose that makes sense, as these are the subreddits for the individual games, rather than for the whole franchise like there is in Assassin's Creed. However, I was just reading these posts over a couple of days, and there were people in there really explaining that these games have had a certain impact on them in some way, shape, or form. There was one in particular that was for AC Odyssey, and the person was saying that for some reason, no other game in the entire world compares to them. I think they equate it to pizza, that no matter what, you'll always come back to pizza. It's not the best food in the world, but it hits the spot just when it needs to. I've got issues with Odyssey and issues with Valhalla that make them fall to the bottom of my overall Assassin's Creed tier list. However, when reading these people rave about them, it got me thinking, I don't think there's any bad Assassin's Creed game. And what I mean by this is, if you look at all the games in the Assassin's Creed franchise, I don't think a single one of them could be argued as being a bad game. They've all got their redeemable qualities, some more than others of course. There's ones that are amazing games and the wider gaming community recognise them as such. For example, you got AC2, and then there's ones that are less favourably recognised by the gaming community, such as AC Unity and AC Valhalla, though ironically enough I think AC Unity is held up to a very high standard by the AC community itself. But what I mean is that there's just no Assassin's Creed game that I think would deserve less than a 6 out of 10 rating for a review. And in my mind, a 6 out of 10 is, better than average. 7 is good, 8 is great, 9s are fantastic, 10s are masterpieces. Go out and play them right now no matter what. I don't think any Assassin's Creed game fits the 10 out of 10 category, but I think a few of them, in my personal opinion, fit the 9, and certainly a lot more fit the 8s and 7s. But going back to what I was saying earlier, specifically about AC Unity, if I'm being honest, I don't like the game, and the reasons I don't like it, I would argue, are mainly because of its connection to Assassin's Creed, or lack thereof. How little it even attempts to be an Assassin's Creed game. That aspect of things really rubs me the wrong way, and I've just never forgiven it, I suppose. But if you look at the wider context of the game, the combat, the mission structure, level design, RPG mechanics, it's a good game. Do I think it's great or amazing? No, not at all. I think the enemies are really damage spongy. I think the stealth is atrocious, the parkour non-existent. However, weirdly enough, the game overall comes together in a weirdly cohesive way, which leads me to say yes, it's a good game. It's worth the price of admission, especially with all the DLC if you get that at a reasonable price. Same for Valhalla. I've got a lot of issues with the individual gameplay components of the game. However, if someone told me, hey, do you like this game? Do you think it's good? I would ultimately confess that, yeah, I do. Another thing with AC Odyssey, and especially Valhalla, is I would recommend them to people who were, like me growing up, unable to afford many games. So when we would make a purchase, it would have to last. I think I put in at least 500 hours in AC3 just because I didn't have many games back then. I had played the previous games heaps, and I was so hyped for Black Flag. I just repeat played the naval missions over and over and over again just to get my fix. I think if Odyssey or Valhalla came out when I was a young fella, I would have loved them so much because I knew that my one-time purchase would keep me engaged for at least 100 hours on just one playthrough. And then when you consider all the free updates and DLC that came out, including new missions and storylines and gameplay, on top of the season pass, which included another 50 hours minimum. Man, those games would have been so worth it when I was a kid. But here's the thing, that's a massive and genuine criticism of these newer games, that they're too long. They're like not enough butter spread over too much bread. However, I think it would be remiss if we did not acknowledge that the length of these games fills a certain type of niche in the gaming community. That person who only buys 2 or 3 games a year, and it's usually the newest FIFA or Madden game, that year's COD, and then Assassin's Creed. For that person, Assassin's Creed would be more unique of the games, and the one that they would probably have more to say about or engage with. Think about young kids as well. I know they have a lot of free-to-play games these days with Fortnite continually being updated, and you could theoretically only play that. But consider that a lot of kids don't have disposable incomes. They got to rely on mum or dad to pay for their games. So if they can only afford a few premium games a year, they've got to pick the one that they can get the most value out of, like I was saying earlier. So those kids buying Assassin's Creed and learning about history along the way, and then also having a lot of time on their hands to play through it, and the games being able to facilitate that free time, I feel like it fills a certain niche, and it doesn't excuse the long length of the games, but it at the very least is something that you could acknowledge about the game as being good. An aspect of Assassin's Creed I think that is worth noting is that there really isn't anything like it on the market. Games like Ghost of Tsushima are very similar, but proper third-person open-world historical games are pretty rare these days. And what sets AC apart from the other games in the wider gaming market is that it has, parkour, stealth, the assassins in it, the assassin's narrative, and I would argue the more important aspect about it being the modern day story. Check out my previous video for my more detailed thoughts on that. But this uniqueness with AC is the reason why I think all the games are good, because they stand out in the wider gaming market, and each game is a puzzle piece in the franchise with its own uniqueness. Compare AC1 to Black Flag and then compare that to Valhalla, just to see the drastic changes this franchise has gone through to keep it fresh and engaging and ultimately good. I should clarify, I do know a lot of people really don't like the Chronicles games, specifically India and Russia, and I haven't played any of them except for China, and I really did like that, so maybe there are some games in Assassin's Creed that aren't good, but I'm thinking more in terms of the mainline games, including Liberation and Rogue. I don't think any of them are bad. And for a series that's got a lot of games in it, especially mainline entries, for none of them to be considered bad, by my personal standard of course, Assassin's Creed is actually doing pretty well for itself. When you compare that to franchises like Star Wars, where hell, people argue that there's only 2 good movies out of that whole franchise, when you compare that to Assassin's Creed is doing pretty well for itself. And I think that's something that we as fans should probably take pride in, the fact that we can look at our franchise and we can say, yes, it is a good franchise. Overall, it's good. There's some really great individual games in there, but overall, it's a really good franchise. You compare that to other gaming franchises where there's just so much division in games. Like, I think about the Dark Souls trilogy. There are such staunch defenders of Dark Souls 2 and then such staunch haters of Dark Souls 2. I know as Assassin's Creed community, we have our eras of Assassin's Creed, the classics, the Kenway Saga, the RPG trilogy, and there's a lot of division in that aspect of things, but there's not that much sort of arguing over individual games that we could say, dampens the whole franchise. It's hard to explain, hard to put into words, but I think we can acknowledge that every game is good in the franchise, and we're doing really well for ourselves. Again, another comparison, let's look at Halo. There's before 343 and after 343, and there's a very noticeable drop in quality. Halo essentially dies in 2012. It's a very slow death, but you can pinpoint that, okay, this is when Halo ended. We haven't got to that point yet with Assassin's Creed. It might happen, who knows, but I think we can say, hey, look, it's a good franchise. I really do like Assassin's Creed. I'm not embarrassed about it. Like if you said, I'm a Halo fan. But I'm just a Bungie Halo fan. I should clarify. I don't think as Assassin's Creed fans we have to clarify. You can say, I prefer the classic era more than the new era, but you can just say, hey, I'm an Assassin's Creed fan, and no one will look at you and be like, yeah, what kind of Assassin's Creed, like if they were with Halo. But yeah, I thought I'd just get my 2 cents out there and sort of bring a bit of community positivity. We can be really proud of the fact that, yeah, Assassin's Creed is good. Is it amazing? Not consistently, has its moments here and there. However, on the whole, pretty good. And if you agree that Assassin's Creed is good, hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, stay safe.